Welcome back to Startup Law for Founders. This is our final episode in this series, and we're going to be covering a topic that has really popped up a lot, I think, at least in my conversations with entrepreneurs in the summer of 2019, and that is a benefit corporation. A lot of these conversations have kind of been sparked by this shift in the Business Roundtable's statement this summer about purpose-driven companies moving towards sustainable models, stakeholder orientation. But just to kind of kick this off, Francesco, what are we talking about when we talk about mission-driven companies or purpose-driven companies?
Yeah, this is what we're talking about really is I think a growing conversation that is happening in culture at large, really about the role of business and the responsibility of business to society as a whole. I would say over the past 30 years or so, as certain like the climate crisis has intensified, economic inequality seems to have intensified. It has raised the question about, we recognize that entrepreneurship, capitalism have been, phenomenal engines of growth and elevating the general well-being on a global basis. And on the other hand, there seem to be some serious problems, and excesses in the system, from environmental externalities to the benefits of the system really accruing to a very small group of people, largely at the expense of other groups of people.
Sure.
So that's kind of sparked a conversation about the role of business, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs and founders that we talk to that that really are looking to create companies that represent a new way of doing business, that kind of are responding to the challenge, and they want to respond to the challenge both in the kind of the products that they're creating and the services that they're bringing, but also in the way that they do their companies, the way they run their companies. They want to run their companies responsibly and sustainably, and kind of point the way forward to how business should be. And so that's really what the benefit corporation as a legal structure emerged in response to. The Business Roundtable can be seen as part of this bigger conversation that's happening about what role should businesses be playing in addressing some of these kind of perceived problems that we have as a society and across the globe.
Yeah, so at the outset of the series, we talked, about entity formation and selection, the type of legal structure that an entrepreneur can use to pool resources, bring people together to make this vision a reality. And one of those, like you mentioned, is the benefit corp, which is a fairly new kind of iteration on this more long-standing entity. What exactly is the difference between a normal corporation and one that is a benefit corporation?
Sure, that's it's a good question. So taking a step back, like what the benefit corporation emerged, it was spearheaded by B Lab, the certified B Corporation entity, and the founders of that entity, and it emerged in response to some fundamental critiques of corporate law as it stood at the time. Which was, we're talking like the entity was developed maybe like 10 years ago. So it was in response to a couple of things. One, in a standard corporation, the fiduciary duties of directors and officers flow to the shareholders, and the critique of that is you have these large, powerful corporate entities that, by virtue of corporate law doctrine, they're mandated to focus on themselves and their shareholders. They're mandated to maximize the wealth of their shareholders, kind of come hell or high water, and so there was a real question being asked about, like, is this really a good idea? Like, do we really want to have these enormous, powerful entities out there, governed, kind of mandated by law to pursue self-interest? That was one critique, um, and so the benefit corporation emerged kind of in response to that prevailing critique. And what it is in all respects like a regular corporation. So for example, taxation wise, it's taxed in the same way. You can do stock options and multiple classes of stock, and all the things that make corporations such efficient forms for entrepreneurs and growth companies. You could do that in a benefit corp as well. The difference is that there are a few key features that change the corporate purpose and the kind of governance rules that apply. So, if you're a benefit corporation, part of your purpose it is to, and I'm talking about a legal purpose. So, so it's not a sort of mission statement that has no legal force. For example, the legal purposes of the corporation is expanded to generating positive impact on society as a whole. Now, obviously, what that means is it's a whole separate question, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But for the time being, it's important, just to understand that part of the legal charter of a benefit corporation is that it will pursue positive impact in the course of doing what it does. And that's different from an ordinary corporation, which has no such mandate in its legal charter. The second element of that's unique to benefit corporations is that the fiduciary duties of officers and directors are modified so that directors and officers of benefit corps, in the course of evaluating business decisions and determining, how a company will proceed, they need to balance the financial interests of shareholders against or with the impact of the company's action on various stakeholders, as well as, the corporation's kind of purpose and mission. So rather than having a kind of single North Star to guide its decision, that is shareholder wealth maximization, you could say that the job of directors and officers of a benefit corporation is more like balancing shareholder wealth maximization with, okay, how's this going to impact all these other people and constituencies, and, what's this going to do for our mission of generating positive impact and, whatever other mission or public benefits this company is created to pursue. Okay. And I think that, and then the third major prong or major sort of feature of benefit corporations is this kind of public accountability aspect, which is that a benefit corporation needs to report publicly on how it's doing in the pursuit of public benefit. And the idea there is that the government is not a state. The government doesn't want to be in the business of determining what is public benefit, and making those, like, does this benefit corporation really qualify as a benefit corporation? Is it really pursuing public benefit? Well, the government recognizes it cannot get into those weeds, in any way, shape, or form. So the approach of the benefit corporation is, let's require them to publicly disclose what they're doing and have consumers and other participants in the economy make the judgment themselves about, like as to the value of what they're doing. So that's the basis of the sort of transparency requirement. And as part of that, the most statutes require benefit corporations to do an internal self audit of their practices against what's called the third party standard, which is an outside and independent evaluation of their corporate practices, governance practices, and so forth. So the most popular, I think, one of third party standard is the certified B corporation. And that's a pretty rigorous standard that any company can take to evaluate how it's doing on public benefit measures, at least according to B Lab and what they think, what they're choosing to measure.
Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about when you mentioned this transparency piece is this kind of notion that probably a lot of people learned in college econ about the invisible hand. It's Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, talking about how self-interest has been this big driver in creating the kind of wealth that has been generated in the industrial and post-industrial revolutions. And it sounds like this is making that hand a little more visible, so that everybody else kind of knows what's happening within these corporate structures, and adding a little outside accountability to all these other people who would be impacted by it.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely the model that and the model and approach that the statute tries to take. And how kind of how that works is a separate question. Is there really robust reporting and public disclosure, and are consumers really well informed? Well, that's a work in progress. But that's the model of that our markets take in general. So public companies are required to disclose a bunch of things, and the view is that it leads to to efficient markets, efficient allocation of resources. I mean, and so the same approach it applies to benefit corporations. Like, let's get the information out there and let the free market, kind of suss things out.
So if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm thinking about, these kind of formation decisions, where and when and how, what is the benefit to me to go this route as a benefit corporation? How do these three prongs actually play out to the benefit of a founder?
Yeah. So, the founders that we represent that that opt into the benefit corporation corporate form, whether it's a California benefit corp or in Delaware it's known as a public benefit corporation. The reason they do it is because they are they're committed to a mission in their companies. Like they're founding their companies to to generate a positive impact, and they want to ensure that that character and that element of their company, the mission centric element of it, and again, that's not necessarily just in like the product that they're creating, but also in the way the company conducts itself, how it treats stakeholders, employees, how it sources its supply, and then the quality and integrity standards in its manufacturing and whatnot, all of that. Like founders want to ensure that that character, essential nature and character of the company is preserved. It's embedded in the legal structure of the company, and that it will remain embedded as the company grows and takes on new shareholders, investors, and so forth. Right. So that's one of the main, let's say, precipitating considerations for the creation of the benefit corp. was this phenomena of you have these like real mission centric companies and they grow, and then investors come on board, and then investors, have to answer to their own limited partners and investors, and so the pressure to squeeze out mission, the edge out mission in favor of efficiency and profits and stuff would, um, you know, became, especially combined with background corporate law, you would have like, you'd have companies whose missions were getting diluted and obliterated or getting acquired by conglomerates and so forth. And so, these mission centric founders are opting into benefit corporations, to say, look, this is the kind of company we want to be. We want to signal that to our consumers. We want to signal it to the people that we're looking to hire. We want to signal it to our investors and future investors, that we're taking a stand for this way of doing things.
How does the market respond to this? Which is to say, are they looking favorably on these investment opportunities in benefit corps? Do the benefit corps perform any better because they have this clear articulated statement of purpose?
Yeah. So in my own like legal practice and in the work that we're doing, like I don't see ultimately all of the benefit companies and that we represent, they raise capital in the same ways, and with the same level of success, I think, than any other company that we represent. They might be raising it from a different category of investor, but they are successful in raising money. And I think at this point there's sufficient track record, where you have lots of venture-backed companies that are organized as public benefit corps or benefit corps. There's been public offering, IPO, Laureate Education IPO'd as a benefit corporation. So there's at this point enough precedent that it's not an altogether unfamiliar entity, so it's, yeah, I haven't really seen that as a major concern out there. That's not to say that there isn't a class and type of investor that just is uncomfortable with it, or would prefer to shy away from it. There may well be, but one of the virtues of the benefit corporation, in a sense, is like, those are the kinds of investors that you actually want to repel them, right? I mean, because it's obviously not a good fit, so. So what I'm saying is, it may be a turnoff to some investors, but that's sort of, kind of part of the reason why you do these things is to self-select and have people opting into as a founder, your vision for the company.
Yeah, I mean, going back to our previous conversation about investors and about capital raising, so much at the outset of that process is doing your diligence and your research to find the investors and the entities that are going to be a good fit. They're going to want to be a partner in the venture and helping pool their own resources and talent and expertise to help the business grow.
Oh yeah, 100%. And there are, I would say, for all investors, like, they financial return is a piece of the puzzle, and it's probably, it's the significant piece, perhaps even the most significant piece. But there's always additional considerations that go into the investment decision. Like, do I believe in this founder? Do I believe in this product? Do I want to be associated with this company? Is this something that I can feel good about and feel proud of, and that will further my own legacy as an investor and a professional, right? And so, yeah, so uh, those additional factors and considerations are significant. And for founders that, like, where, a passionate founder goes a long way. and one that is dedicated, committed to their to their to their vision, and willing to see it through. That says a lot and makes a big difference.
Francesca, what do you see happening with this form and with this movement, kind of going forward in the future? If you had a crystal ball, is this something that you think is going to continue to gain traction? What do you think?
I think it's very difficult to say. That there is no question that the broader dialogue that I was talking about in terms of the role of business, that question's already been answered. There's massive traction and movement and getting companies to be more responsible, uh, and to measure and report on their impact, and so there's that question's been answered, and I think we're going to continue to see stakeholders environmentally in all kinds of ways. Um, so the whether the benefit corporation, like the role of benefit corporations in that broader dialogue, and whether this entity will, will grow from something kind of relatively niche to more mainstream adoption, I think is a very it remains to be an open question. What I think is more likely to occur is that benefit corporate, like what we saw with the roundtable, for example. The roundtable's articulation of the role and responsibility of companies to stakeholders is a response, I would say, to the benefit corporation, and it's basically saying, like, yeah, we're on board with this general idea. Um, you know, I don't. There's a lot of nuance and subtlety there, but in general picture terms, it's the benefit corporation and what it the critique that it embodies and represents, I think, is already impacting the business community at large. And so to that extent, I think it's already been quite successful. Um, but I don't know, like, I don't know how big it will grow. It's very tough to say.
It is definitely an interesting, and it's so new still. I mean, if you think about,
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I still think that there are some tough questions, that are being asked, and rightfully so, about, well, is this really about benefit? Like, I think that the critique of benefit corporations, and you saw this in response to the roundtable statement, is like, well, if a company has to be accountable to not just shareholders but everybody, like, then essentially you have no accountability. Essentially, like, there's no way to evaluate how boards are doing, because they could just say, well, we're doing it for this party or this party. So it sort of paradoxically insulates boards from accountability rather than enhances accountability, because you at least with the shareholder fiduciary duties, you have, like, there's clarity in that standard, right? But if you have this balancing test and the board has discretion to do all this balancing, well, how do you evaluate if they're doing that well, and have you essentially just thrown all accountability out the window? That's a tough question. It's an important question, and those kinds of questions, we're really in the early stages of exploring them and answering them, and it's a good thing. But it's also, I think, a reason why, why with the benefit corp is at its very earliest stages of existence, and corporations have been around for, you know uh, I don't know, I think like a couple hundred years. So
this is another area where the states are able to be, these kinds of laboratories of democracy, trying new things and seeing how these forms and these structures and these rules are going to evolve over time.
Yeah, very true. It's a really good point, and it is a place where like one of the benefits of our system is really evident. You know, because you have not only do you have the regular corps and benefit corps, but you have a couple of different models of benefit corporations out there. Like you have the Delaware version, which is actually quite different from the California version, and so we get to see how these different versions and experiments play out and make some collective decisions.
Yeah. Um, for those at home watching along, we do have a few other resources on this topic, including an interview with John Montgomery, a California lawyer who was prominent in the adoption of this framework within the state of California, as well as some blog posts and other resources. And of course, you can reach out directly to us if this is something you're interested in.
Yeah, that's a great interview with John, and he's a real pioneer in the area. Uh, well, good. Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. This was a good conversation.
Thank you as well. And thank you at home.